Still Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Villanova Tip Time. I'm your host, Chris Notaro. Today is Wednesday, January 12th, and we are here about 20 minutes ahead of the Villanova Wildcats, 14th ranked Villanova Wildcats, taking on the 17th ranked Xavier Musketeers in Cincinnati, Ohio. And one of the most exciting games on the Villanova schedule. So really pumped to be here. Also, notice that, just after dark here, dark sweatshirt, it literally looks like I'm just part of the wall. All right, I think I'm back in action. Sorry about that. A little bit of technical difficulty. And yep, I'm back. Okay, good. Whew. A little nerve wracking there. No idea what's going on with the production software and YouTube, but some sort of glitch there. Apologies. Pick right back up where I left off. Today is Wednesday, January 12th. We're here ahead of Villanova at Xavier, and really, really excited for tonight's game. What might be the biggest game left on the schedule for sure for January. Not quite for the year. We've got some awesome games coming up. Really, there are no non-awesome games in the Big East, especially the way that it's shaping up this year. But this is probably going to be Nova's last ranked matchup here for at least a few weeks until we get into the sort of the early mid-February timeframe of the schedule, unless maybe Marquette could sneak up into the ranks, but most likely not. It's probably going to be our last ranked game until we play Seton Hall again. Maybe UConn gets into the rankings by the time we play them, and then certainly Providence, but we don't play Providence until mid-February or so. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is the rankings jump, yet the fact that we are still seeing Villanova as underrated. So some of the various rankings that we're tracking, and hat tip to at atip4 on Twitter, he tweeted this to me and the full 40 last night, that Nova right now is KenPom number 5, the net ranking number 7, their BPI number 3, RPI number 8, ESPN Power Index number 8, but yet our AP and Coach Poll ranking is number 14. So what's happening here is most likely an overcorrection for that first Creighton loss. Coming at the end of that same week that we lost to Butler, which was really our only rough loss of all the big boppers that we played, was that Baylor game. Later that week, lost badly at Creighton in a final score that looked worse than the game probably was. And we were very much dinged in the AP and the coaches poll as a result of that. Luckily, those don't matter even a little bit in the grand scheme of things. The AP and the coaches poll, I guess it kind of matters where you end up in the where you end the season, right? But that the KenPom ranking I find to be a little bit more effective, and that net ranking is what the tournament committee is actually using for consideration more so than the AP and coaches poll. So if those things have us, in the 5 to 7 range, we're in pretty good shape right now, Villanova Nation. And I think, honestly, which we'll talk about in a second, that DePaul game, we should be feeling better about that game than I think a lot of fans are giving Villanova credit for. But before we get to there, we're going to talk a little bit about notable wins and losses around the country. I think to start just around college basketball as a whole, the biggest news is that both remaining unbeaten teams went down last night. That includes number 1 Baylor, who lost to Texas Tech. Texas Tech having a monster couple of days, having just beaten number 6 Kansas a couple of days ago. Texas Tech entering this like murderer's row of a Big 12 schedule, also without their best player and leading scorer. I think it's amazing what Texas Tech has been able to do this year, regardless, after the sort of shocking news at the end of last year of their head coach Chris Beard leaving for Texas. Of course, Texas Tech fans should know, Villanova fans should know Chris Beard pretty well because he has sort of announced himself as a disciple of the school of Jay Wright. But there's nothing less Jay Wright than leaving Texas Tech to go for Texas. So awesome to see what Texas Tech has been able to do. Like I said, they also beat number 6 Kansas the other day. You saw number 21 LSU defend home court against 18th ranked Tennessee, who we all know from Villanova's earlier game against them. Also on Saturday, you saw number 11 Iowa State fall at unranked Oklahoma. You saw number 14 Texas and Chris Beard, although I think he was maybe out with COVID protocol himself. But 14 Texas fell at unranked Oklahoma State. And then finally, you saw 15th ranked Alabama lose at Mizzou. This was all on Saturday, with the exception of Texas Tech beating Baylor yesterday. So it's been a really busy couple of days. You've seen a lot of moving and shaking in the polls. Around the Big East, you saw number 24 Seton Hall beat UConn on Saturday in a 90-87 thriller. You also saw number 16 Providence overcome a small halftime deficit against St. John's at home at the Dunk in Rhode Island. Providence went on to win that game with a strong second half. And then lastly, you saw DePaul fall last night to 0-5 in Big East play with a valiant loss at Marquette. Otherwise, there have been a number of COVID delays, COVID issues, what have you. Most bracketology does have the Big East up to being about a 7-bid league, even though tonight's game is Nova's last ranked matchup for a little while. As we've said many times before, there are no breaks on this schedule. So, what did we learn in Chicago? I think number one, I thought it was really interesting that at halftime, the sky seemed like it was falling with most of the Villanova fans, the Villanova Twitter sphere. There was the complete absence of level heads. I even tweeted at halftime of that game, and I said, basically, calm down. DePaul played really their perfect brand of basketball. The officiating was terribly lopsided. Really, really inconsistent, poor officiating in that game. I'm programmed to just complain about the refs all the time, so I try not to use myself as a barometer. I've got a couple of buddies that are more level-headed and usually yell at me for honing in on the refs a little too much. And even they were like crying bloody murder with how that game was officiated. And in the end, it just felt like at halftime, like Nova's clearly the better team here. DePaul's going to regress to the mean. DePaul's also not as bad as previous years and people giving them credit for. I think even though they started 0-5 in the Big East, that it's going to be tough for Coach Stubblefield to keep his players focused and grinding, but they're definitely not as bad as previous years. So in the end, I think this game was a lot better for Villanova than I think anybody's going to give them credit for. Their ability to persevere and grind and have such a strong second half to eventually run away with it and win this game by 15. Colin Gillespie, we're not worthy. The man had a season high, 28 points, 4 boards, and an assist to go with them. And really just a sort of a vintage Colin Gillespie game. Other notables that stumped out, I think number 1, Justin Moore stacking awesome performances together. He had played really well against Creighton in the week prior. Really, really well again here against DePaul, adding 21 points, 7 boards, and 3 assists. That's a pretty monster stat line for him. And then I love to see Caleb Daniels picking up right where he left off. Hit a couple of big threes when the game was still close. He had 11 points, 3 boards, and an assist. And I think the most important thing there, which I already said, but I'm going to repeat because it is so important, is that he comes back from another COVID layoff and picked right back up where he left off, where his last game, ironically, against this Xavier team who we'll see tonight, before he went on that COVID layoff, was like, man, this guy's really hitting his stride. So awesome to have him back. And I think just to summarize, what did we learn? Going to be the third time I'm saying it here tonight. There are no days off in the Big East, and no days off means no days off. This game was no exception. What did we learn? Number 2, Colin Gillespie is a generational player. I don't know that we learned that on Saturday. We've known that for a while. But oh my goodness, appreciate him now as a super senior. We're definitely going to miss him when we can no longer watch Colin Gillespie wear a Villanova jersey. But it's amazing when we get the chance, and we'll continue to get the chance, hopefully, for the next 2 to 3 months. And then lastly, I would say the Cats are continuing to get better. I know most people aren't going to take much stock from a win at DePaul, but still, this team is continuing to get better. And there will be no test greater than tonight for the Cats that they're going to see Xavier on the road in the Cintas Center in Cincinnati. So where did we see Xavier last? That was December 21st at the Finneran Pavilion. Villanova did win that game by 13, despite being down by 8 points at the half. They completely dominated the second half and pulled away late. I don't know that a 13-point win really reflects the back and forth nature, but again, because the Cats were coming from down 8, Xavier played lights out in that first half. Villanova had a really, really strong second half performance to take control of it and ultimately win this game by a comfortable margin. It was a very balanced effort with sort of 4 big contributors. Justin Moore had a 17-point game. Caleb Daniels, I think this was his season high at 16 points. Eric Dixon, this was one of those games that we would call the Eric Dixon game. He had 15, and Gillespie also added what would be a quieter 15. Still a really nice effort from him. And most notably from that first game with Xavier, the Cats owned the interior really well, especially in that second half. Eric Dixon had among his best games of the year, and like we said, he's stacked quite a few of them together now, but this one stood out above the others. And that stifling second half defensive performance from the Cats made us take a huge step forward in the defensive rankings and the adjusted defensive rankings on KenPom. Due to COVID postponements, though, Xavier has actually only played 1 game since then, which was this past Friday when they beat Butler 87-72 at Hinkle Fieldhouse. So it was a road game for Xavier. Good, solid road win there. It's the only game they've played since we saw them last. So I think there's sort of a 2 halves to that coin, right? On the positive side, they may be a little bit rusty, but on the not so positive side, this is fresh in their mind, and they're looking to punch Nova in the mouth now that Nova's coming into their place. Worth pointing out that Xavier's only 2 losses of the season so far are to Villanova and Iowa State, who was ranked as high as 11 last week. I'm not sure off the top of my head what they fell to, probably mid-teens ranking. In both of those losses for Xavier, Nova and Iowa State, the Musketeers went frigidly cold and died by the hand of the 3-point shots that just weren't falling. So you see that as an X factor for tonight's game immediately about whether or not Xavier is going to be able to shoot well, or whether or not the Cats defense is going to look like it did in the second half of game 1. Because how that tale has gone, so too has gone the story of Xavier's season so far. Like I mentioned, the Cats playing really good defense in that second half of the first matchup. That was also without Brian Anton. His return happens to coincide with this 4-game winning streak that Villanova's on, where the defense has been mostly outstanding. I think actually Xavier was the Brian Anton came back to the game after that. So the fact that Villanova was able to look so good in the second half with the right defensive adjustments against Xavier the first time, and they're getting Brian Anton back in the mix for this game where he wasn't involved in that first game, the Cats should be in good position to play solid defense, but you have to know that Xavier is going to switch up the game plan and switch up the approach because they can't let that happen again. So guys to know, I think guys to know for Xavier, it's interesting when you look at the top 5 scorers, top 5 leading scorers for Xavier. They're arguably their best player, or what was expected to be their best player coming into the season. Zach Fremantle is not even on that top 5 list right now, although he has certainly not been at peak due to some injury troubles. He missed a bunch of games in the beginning, and he just hasn't quite looked himself. Last year where he won that most outstanding player award, hasn't quite gotten back there. But you have a guy who's kind of lying dormant, not even in their top 5, who could really break out at any time. The other 2 guard names to know are going to be Nate Johnson, who is their leading scorer right now at just shy of 13 points a game. And I think he's shooting something like 47% from 3. So he's their deep threat by far. And then you have senior guard Paul Scruggs also adding 11 points a game and almost 5 boards a game. And he's the name that's probably going to ring a bell for most of you because he's their senior player. He's been in the mix, I believe, all 4 of his years there. So, Paul Scruggs is a name that most Nova fans would equate with Xavier at this point. Lastly, I would mention Adam Kunkel, who's going to join Nate Johnson as that kind of secondary perimeter threat, as their sort of sniper, if you will. Although, like I said, Nate Johnson shooting around 47% from 3. I think Adam Kunkel's only shooting right now around 37% from 3, so a little bit lesser of a clip. But I think by most accounts, he looks like he's been a little bit off his game lately, so he's pretty ready to break out. So, with a few minutes left for the game tonight, kind of recap what are some keys to tonight's game. I think the first and foremost thing I'm looking for is which Villanova defense do we see? Do we see the first half defense from December 21st, or do we see the second half defense from December 21st? If it is the former, if it's the first half defense where Xavier was real hot, took that 8-point lead into halftime, the question is going to be, can our guys stay hot? Because that triple-headed monster of Gillespie, Moore, and Daniels, which we saw firing on all cylinders against DePaul, notably in the second half against DePaul, I don't think there are many teams that are going to beat us when those guys are shooting the lights out from 3. I mean, how many different ways can we find to say, shoot them up, sleep in the streets? And with that 3-headed monster of Gillespie, Moore, and Daniels, if they're hot, everything else just becomes a lot easier. And that's not rocket science by any means. But really looking for the defense to show up for a consistent, full 2-half performance and utilizing the fact that they now have Brian Anton in the mix to create extra defensive looks to keep it looking more like the second half of their first round against Xavier. I would also point out that Brandon Slater is still dealing with the ankle injury, so I don't know if it's quite a key to tonight's game because it sounds like Coach Wright said he's going to be good to go. But if you look at the box score over the last handful of games, Brandon Slater is definitely due. The shooting and the scoring has fallen off a little bit from what we saw in the non-conference, but it feels like he's due. It feels like this nagging ankle injury, plus the fact that he's a mostly unselfish player, means he hasn't been getting as much opportunity or looking for as much opportunity, but it feels like Brandon Slater's ready for a breakout game as soon as he can get that ankle feeling good enough. Lastly, I'm looking for the Musketeers to try and shut down Dixon a little bit harder because he had such a strong performance against them the first time these two teams matched up a few weeks ago. That's going to create a lot of natural opportunities for Jermaine Samuels to take over strong in the paint. Can he capitalize? Can he get out of his own head? Can he not try and do too much? And can he take advantage of the fact that defense might be keying in on Dixon down low, which is going to create some opportunities for Jermaine to take it in strong. So, with that said, I think we're about ready for tonight's game. We're going to see you next on Sunday, ahead of a noon game where the Cats are going to take on Butler at home. We're going to do a little shorty episode for that. Interesting that the Cats are going to be going up against the Philadelphia Eagles playoff game, so that'll be fun for many of you Philly area folks who hopefully have 2 TVs. Then next Wednesday, it'll be a night you don't want to miss as Villanova retires Josh Hart's jersey ahead of an 8 p.m. contest with Marquette at the Pavilion. We're excited for all the above, but we don't want to look past tonight in Cincinnati because tonight would be another Quad 1 win for Villanova that would make them tied for the lead of Quad 1 wins in the Big East. So we really want to snatch this one tonight on the road at Xavier. So grab your favorite spot on the couch. Make sure you stop for a quick beverage refresh before you do that because, ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time. Thank you very much.